Country boundaries. The boundaries of the new African nations are those of the old British, Belgian, French, German, and Portuguese colonies. They are essentially artificial in the sense that some of them do not correspond with any well-marked ethnic divisions. Because of this, the Ews, like some other ethnic groups, have remained fragmented under the three different flags, just as they were divided among the three colonial powers after the Berlin Conference of 1844 that partitioned Africa. A portion of the Ews went to Britain, another to Germany, and a small section in Benin Dahomey went to France. After World War I, the League of Nations gave the Germans occupied areas to Britain and France as mandated territories. Those who were under the British are now the Ghanaian Ews, those under the French are Togo, and Benin Dahomey Ews, respectively. The Alo Ews are part of the Ghanaian Ews group and they form about 13% of the Ghanaian population, 1,615,700 in Ghana, 1991. The Ewe-speaking people of West Africa inhabit the areas between the River Volta in modern Ghana and the River Mano on the western borders of the ancient Kingdom of Benin Dahomey, see Map 1. To be supplied, and extends from the Atlantic coast inland up to about latitude 7.6 N in the east and latitude 7.20 inches N in the west. Across the southeastern boundary line are related people, the Fon of present-day Republic of Benin, formerly Dahomey. Ewe language. According to UNESCO Grouping of Languages 1985, Ewe is a community language of Africa and its homeland stretches between three West African countries, namely, the republics of Ghana, Togo, Benin Dahomey, and Tabatagree in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. According to linguists, and also Westerman and Bryan, 1952, the Ewe language, Ewegbi, belongs to a member of the Kwa family of Sudanic languages. As stated by Greenberg, 1970, Kwa languages constitute a sub-family of the Niger-Congo family of the Congo-Kordovanian language family of Africa. There are several dialects, variants, of the Ewe languages spoken in Eweland. The dialectical difference, as in the case of all languages with dialects, are found in one or more of the following, namely speech sounds used, choice between synonyms and forms of words, pitch tonal variations and mode of expressions. Some of these dialects are mutually intelligible, but only with difficulty. The population of all Ewe-speaking people has always been a subject of debate. Awunor 1974 writes, according to various uncoordinated census accounts and estimates, the Ews may number anywhere between 2 and 5 million. There are many different schools of thought about the origins of the Ewe tribe, with a school of thought tracing the origin as far back as an earlier settlement in Adzatone, a suburb founded by Ham, the second son of Noah in the Bible, Noah being the progenitor of various tribes. It is here that we learnt about the biblical story of the building of the Tower of Babel to enable the people get close to God, see Him and pray to Him, followed by God's displeasure and the resultant fall of the tower and dispersion of the people into clusters of people speaking various languages instead of the single one that first united them. This story is credited as being the source of a group speaking one language today known as the Ewe language. Where this occurred is placed in Babylon in present Iraq, and various groups left to find new settlements of their own. Settlement in Egypt. Oral tradition claims the Ewe people were led by an ancestor called Gu, under whose leadership they settled at the delta of the River Nile, in present-day Egypt. Other ethnic groups also settled in Egypt then, including the Jews forced by draft in their land of Canaan. There were cultural exchanges among the various people, with groups adopting practices of others with whom they lived in close proximity. The acts of circumcision of male children, pouring of libation learnt via the worship of the sun god, outdooring of newborn babies, widowhood rights, kingship and burial of kings and chiefs with their personal effects, some customary practices adopted by the Yus from the Egyptians and the Jews. They also learnt the composition of long songs from the Jews. Settlement in Sudan. When it became difficult living in Egypt, just as the Jews left under the leadership of Moses, the Yus also left under a leader Mi and migrated in a southwesterly direction that brought them into the Sudan, where they made settlement for a while close to present-day Khartoum. The stay there was short due to drought, famine and slave raids by Arab slave traders who preferred black slaves to their own kind, due to their physique and courage. At the time, there were numerous schools in and around Khartoum, and some Yus took advantage of these schools to become great scholars, merchants and farmers. Settlement in Ethiopia. The Ewe people decided to leave Sudan, and going southeast towards went into Abyssinia, the present-day Ethiopia. However, the slave raids continued here, and some members were captured and sold and were sent to as far away as India to serve in the courts of their kings and queens. Settlement between Niger Bend and the middle reaches of River Senegal. As the people were unable to repel the superior weapons of the Arabs and Indians, they finally decided to move out of Ethiopia too. This time, they moved southwestwards into the region between the bend of River Niger and the middle reaches of the River Senegal. All these movements occurred between AD 500 and 1200. Oral tradition has it that they made significant contributions to the rise of the Old Ghana Empire, whose capital then was Wallata, near Timbuktu. The Old Ghana Empire declined and was replaced by the Mali Empire, led by a powerful king, Mari Jata, whose state insignia was the lion, which the Yus call Zata, and by deduction, the name of the emperor is said to mean in Yu, Amiya I Zata. The Mali Empire lasted until AD 1513, disintegrating after the death of its powerful ruler Mari Jata, and due to internal and external forces, many sub-ethnic and cultural groups departed from the area, rather than stay to serve under the new overlords, the Songhai, who conquered the old Mali Empire. Whilst residing at the Niger Bend, they contributed to the emergence of all three empires of Ghana, Songhai and Mali. Settlements in Nigeria, Dahomey and Togo. After the breakup of the last of these empires and by following the Niger River southeastwards, the ancestors of the Yus moved into the present-day Nigeria. At the height of the Oyo Empire, settled briefly at Ile-Ife in Yoruba land, Osun state of Nigeria, but moved on at the fall of the Oyo Empire, and going westward, they entered Dahomey, present-day Republic of Benin. It was in Ile-Ife that they revived and perfected the art of divination, Afakaka, which their ancestors abandoned in Mesopotamia. They also settled in Kitu, a Yoruba town in modern-day Benin. Kitu is also called Amedzorp or Mawup in the accounts. The Yoruba people founded Kitu by the 14th century at the latest. Settlements in the Kingdom of Tato. At Dahomey they split into three groups. The first group settled at the bank of the Mano River and named that place Tato Tonda or a Tonda, which became a powerful kingdom and the historical capital. Settlements in the city-state of Natsi. The second group moved on to settle between the Mano and the Heho rivers. This settlement became Natsi, in present-day Republic of Togo. The third group settled at what then was Adel country, where they established the nucleus of what later became the Kingdom of Dahomey, but then called Dogbo Nyigbo. Some members from this group moved out later to join those already settled at Natsi, and in this new settlement, the earlier settlers referred to them as Dogboawo, due to their earlier association with the settlement at Dogbo Nyigbo. Note that Dogbo is a town between Agbom and Tato. The migrants who left Tato followed a path of a hunter by the name of Fots or Endetsi, or the ancestor Noin or Da, depending on the version told. All migrants were given a portion of Natsi by their hosts to settle on, to be by themselves. Thus there were various settlements of the Ewe people at Nazi, and they were all semi-autonomous with their own leaders. According to some accounts, at its greatest height, the city of Nazi consisted of 36 neighborhoods. The Dogbo quarter therefore had its own leader, same as other U groups. The several and separate quarters were all however ruled by one great king of Nazi. Some of these leaders and kings were Adela Blebua, Samla, Adela Zawo, Ape, Adela Torbal, Agar and Agar Korli. Some of the original 7 quarters are Tegbi, Tako, Ekli, Agbaladome, Anape, and Adime, and the deserted spaces are called Watsegbim, Sujafem, Gbedakordzi, the marketplace and Azakordzi. We have learnt so far that, according to oral tradition, the present-day Ualand is not the original home of the entire U-speaking people. There are several accounts of their migration to the present land from various places such as the Sudan, Nigeria, République du Benin Dahomey, and République du Togo Togoland. As we have read earlier, some students of U history have tried to push this supposed point of departure further back to Belabel, which is in turn identified with the Babel of the Bible. Others have suggested Mesopotamia, Egypt, etc., as the point of origin of the U's. Since oral tradition loses historical facts with time, there is no scientific basis for all these claims, not at this time, even though several researchers are looking into these claims. When it comes to written history, there is however some agreement as research was able to trace our origin up to a point. Manukian 1952 writes, all traditions agree that the U-speaking people came from somewhere in the north, and although each sub-tribe gives a slightly different version of the story, it seems to be generally accepted that they migrated from a place called Kitu or Amedzo, not the present one in the Republic of Ghana, somewhere east of the Niger following a conquest, and thereafter settled down in a place called Natsi, usually considered Tawacha, in which is now French Togoland. Faye 1959 says, the line of migration of the U is remembered as Kitu Tato Nuatsi Natsi. Akinjogbeat 1967, Betho 1949, and some oral historians put the line of migration as Oyo Kitu Natsi, or Oyo Kitu Tato Natsi. Whether Oyo or Tato is left out from the line of migration by some groups through forgetfulness or because their stay was very brief and therefore insignificant is not known. Other accounts also indicate that the Ewe people had lived in Kitu, a Yoruba town in the Republic of Benin. At Kitu there lived other people besides the forefathers of the Yus. These were Yorubas, the ancestors of the present Asia and Fon and the Gadangme. According to Kadzo Vordoagu 1994, and Agbodeka 1997, it is not certain when they began to live there and how long they lived there. It was the gradual westward expansion of the Yoruba that pushed the Yu and their kin, Asia, from Kitu. Their movement must have started sometime before the end of the 16th century. On leaving Kitu the people split into 2 big divisions. One of these went due south and in turn divided into 2. One of these subdivisions went to found a settlement on the eastern side of River Mano and called it Tato. Later, they crossed the river and penetrated the forests on its banks. They then settled in the town called Natsi, a settlement between the rivers Heiho and Mano, which had been founded by the advanced second subdivision group of migrants from Kitu around 1500. The second big group went to the Adel region in present-day Togo. To this group belonged the people who came to be known as the Alo, B and Fon. They later joined their relatives at Natsi. There, they were known collectively as Dogboawo. Their leaders were Omega Wanya and his nephew Srope Shri, son of Omega Wanya's sister Asongo, who was the son of the king of Tato. Shri had fled from Tato with his father, stool following a succession dispute with his half-brothers after their father's death. At this juncture, it will be useful to note that the Dagboawo, as well as the entire Ewe people of West Africa, once lived together at Kitu. The arrival of the Ewe-speaking people in Nazi is placed around ca. 1500. There is no evidence of how long they were in Nazi. However, depending on what tradition one wants to follow, they either came from Kitu to Nazi or Tado to Nazi. Manukian 1952 writes, according to these traditions, in the three main groups, a northern, a middle and southern group, each of which migrated to and settled in different parts of Togoland, their present home. At any rate, in all accounts, Nazi was their last stop and center of dispersion. Nazi was also a crucial and significant point in the history of the Ewe people, especially the Alas. Nazi is to the Ewe-speaking people as Egypt is to the Jews. In those days there was general hostility everywhere. It is in this context that two walls were built around Nazi. The first, smaller, known as Agbogbovi, was constructed during the reign of Da, perhaps in the 15th century. According to some accounts it was built to cut off the royal enclosure from all but members of the royal clan. Like Kitu, the city of Nazi also had a second 17 inches by 30 inches wall to protect its inhabitants from external attack on all settled lands and their farmland. The entire community of Nazi lived within these encircling second walls called Agbogbo. On the advice of Agakorli III, the wall imitated two semicircles, and facing eastward toward Tado. Nazi was divided into separate quarters inhabited by members of the different migrating groups. Each group lived in a separate area under its own head or chief. Although each of these heads was the judge in matters concerning his own people, a supreme king ruled over all of them. The early kings of Nazi ruled well and the kingdom flourished. The prosperity of the city was recorded by the French traveler Elby in 1669, when he wrote, "The king of this land is powerful and runs it well. His grand politics are devoted to conflict resolution and fairness. His neighbors hesitate to attack because of his power. It is believed that he can deploy easily 5,000 warriors and that the town is as populated and as large as Paris." Development of centralized power. From the time of the arrival of immigrants from Tado, the village of Tegbi was governed by a theocratic power known as Mawuno, the grand priest of the divinity, Mawu. An alliance between these two communities produced Nazi. The future Yu descendants refer in their traditions to an arrangement that allowed them exclusive right to enthrone the kings of Nazi at Tako. From Tako, the royal lineage established its center at Dakpadzi, the hill of Gayabar and Aguiga, 2005. The king of Nazi carried several titles including Enigbafia, Mawufia and Homefia. Here, as in Tado, the king held only nominal power. He reigned but did not govern. The manner in which he operated, in which he was confined and the prohibitions that governed his actions were very similar to that of Tado. The investiture of the king followed two stages. After the selection of the king, a procession to the sanctuary of Neo Frico, the chief goes into seclusion for a number of days during which the town nobles and priests conduct various religious ceremonies. The reign of King Agokoli of Nazi. When the Dogbos arrived in Nazi, their host King Adela Atogbal received them well and treated them nicely. Adela Torbal, the king, later married Mama Asongo, a former wife of Adza Ashimadi, king of Tado, and mother of Kapano, who later became Shri I, leader and later the first Awomfia of the Dogbo group. Asongo gave birth to a number of girls for Adela Torbal, the eldest being Mama Kokui Wala, the mother of Satsu Adaladza, second Awomfia of the Dogbo in their new settlement at Anloga. 5. After the death of Ago, his successor Ago Akoli became king just before the middle of the 17th century. According to all accounts he was an energetic and dynamic leader, and he ended some of the proscriptions that inhibited the exercising of his function as leader. Unfortunately, things were not exactly the same during the new regime. It is undeniable that, during his reign, conflicts arose. Conflict within the city stemmed from Agokoli's desire to leave his traditional enclosure against the wishes of his councillors. Conflict also arose because of the construction of the monumental walls, which involved the mobilization of large manpower and extremely unpleasant conditions. He sought to impose his will on the people and generally tyrannized them by setting them a number of impossible tasks to perform. He punished those who did not obey him and flaunted all traditions. Because of this, the name Agokoli is synonymous with singular violence and tyrannical cruelty. This tradition was first transcribed by German pastors and popularized in French by the version of Pastor Kwakum in 1948. Since then, it has become the irrefutable tradition associated with all Ewe people. Regardless of the veracity of the tale, the reign of Agokoli profoundly marked the period and the deep legacy left in the collective memory of the Ewe as the primary cause of the different migrations from Nazi and the occupation of present-day Eweland. As a tradition, the Ewe-speaking people were adorned mainly because of their skills in the arts of drumming, singing and dancing. They were regularly requested to entertain the king, his visitors and other favorites. As a consequence, the Ews were allowed to play their drums, sing and dance all through the night without any interference from the authorities. Despite all these attributes of the Ews, the new king was still very hostile to them and ruled all the immigrants with an iron hand. For example, he ordered that all elderly people should be killed, but the Dagboawo managed to keep one old man in hiding. His name was Tegli. It was Tegli who advised them to ask the women in all Ewe settlement groups to throw bath and other wastewater against the thick wall around Nazi to soften it, making it possible for them later to break it down by the trust of Togbui Tegli's sword or dagger, Adekbui, in the hands of Togbui Asur, leader of one of the Ewe groups, to whom he entrusted it after libation and the invocation of prayers to all known gods and ancestors. The reason for killing all elderly people was to deprive the immigrants of personnel with wisdom, experience and expert legal advice in times of need. See Proverb number 24. The old man, Tegli, was consulted in times of need. There is an old adage that, wisdom and experience develops with old age. At a point in time, King Agokoli also ordered the Ews to make a rope out of clay. Upon consultation with Elder Tegli, the Ews sent a delegation to King Agokoli requesting to see an old rope that was made from clay so that they could imitate it. One of the Anlo's Hogbetsitso songs incorporates these words of wisdom, Zozoawo nu wagbi yeiwo du. This humble and wise request by the Dagboawo infuriated King Agokoli. He wondered where they could have gotten this idea. As happened to the Israelis in Egypt prior to the Exodus, the king, Agokoli, saw the wisdom exemplified in that reply and he became more tyrannical to the Dagboawo. He made the Ewe-speaking people execute very dangerous and laborious tasks for his wicked pleasure. At several times, he ordered the Ews to mix a mud-concrete mortar used to make house with their bare feet and hands. The mud concrete was previously mixed with broken pieces of bottles, glass, nails, torn, and other hazardous materials. Let us note that glass would have been available to Agokoli and Company, as the Kingdom of Nupe existed in the region and earned fame for its native glass industry, SF Nadal. A Black Byzantium. The Kingdom of Nupe in Nigeria, London, 1969, pp. 274-277. During the mixing process, the Dagboawo would bleed profusely from their feet and hands. Amemikumaku pe lorbialao, and founding of Agavedzi, Klakir and Bamago, a sad and cunningly vengeful event finally broke the camel's back. It is popularly referred to as Emil le Agbi Gaekbi lore. The story goes like this. One day, a quarrel broke out between a handful of Dogbo Nyagboawo and factions of King Agoa Korli, aka King Agar Korli people. During the scuffle, a Dogbo man named Aga was wounded by a Nazi man called Zejua, a close relation of King Agar Korli. Oral history had it that during the fight, King Agar Korli's relative, Zejua severely beat Aga to unconsciousness, almost to death. Around that time, a Dogbo Nyagbo man had died of natural causes. After the fight was over, some of the Dogboawo hatched out a plan and informed King Agakorli that the severely beaten Aga had died as a result of his injuries and broken bones. A funeral was then arranged for the dead person, Aga. King Agarkali was so infuriated with the fact that his own relative was responsible for this heinous crime and ordered that Zejua be put to death as a deterrent to others who may take the law into their own hands. This decree was subsequently carried out. After Agarkorli had his relation executed for the crime, the Dogbos organized the final funeral rites of Aga, and too much drinking made some of the drunkards boast. Miawo ni adza pe viwo so adzatome, amemakumaku pe lorbialao. A few days or weeks after Zejua was executed, some of the Dogbo Nyagbos were also heard bragging that they have taken vengeance on King Agarkali. They were heard making the statement, Emil le Agbi Gaekbi lore. Unfortunately, this information got to King Agarkali. He was so infuriated that he made life completely unbearable to the Dogboawo. The legendary Togbi Atsu Sala, see below, and several Dogbo elders were worried about the state of events and wanted the Dogbo elders to go and apologize to King Agarkali, since they believed that the Dogboawo were on the wrong side of the issue. This advice was however not taken. It is one of the reasons why Togbi Atsu Sala and several others left Nazi prior to the general exodus. Meanwhile, when Aga was in hiding, Agarkorli's people were threatening to smoke him out, but he was a close friend to one Nazi man called Kleet, son of Torgbi Epe, who advised him to escape and accompanied him till they reached present-day Aberlov and A5, meeting the earlier settlers, the Aberlers there. They subsequently left Aberlov and Aga went to settle at Agavedzi, while Klee settled at and founded Klakir. When Agar heard of Agarkorli's plan to send warriors after him, he moved on to Bamago and later founded a number of settlements at present-day Agave territory. The direct result of this incident was Agarkorli's decision to wall his state kingdom, and as punishment, using the Dogbos to prepare the mortar, with broken pots and thorns mischievously mixed into it for the building of the wall. The exodus of Dogboawo and others from Nata migration. As King Agokoli's rule became unbearable, various groups of the population decided to migrate. Because of the king's repressive acts, the Yus initiated a secret plan to escape. Tatar 1973 writes, along with the need for more land and food, malcontents, inspired by the tyrannical rule of Agokoli, king of Natsi in the late 1600s, they instigated another general movement west and south. The groups that migrated are those that make up the Ewe tribe of today. The 17 inches by 30 inches wall that offered protection to the entire population eventually became a barrier to the Dogboawo in planning their escape. However, they finally carried out their plan through. After several consultations with the Oldman Tegli at his hiding place, the Dogboawo came up with a plan. They instructed their women to throw water against one spot of the wall while washing their clothes and dishes. The women executed this plan without knowing the reason. One day when the elders found out that the wall was wet and soft enough, they decided to implement the final stage of their plan. The elders gathered all their people together near the wet wall and started drumming, singing and dancing. There was a lot of jubilation in the Dogbo section of the city from late afternoon throughout into the night. About midnight, while the rest of the people of Nazi went to bed and the Misigo, Husigo, meaning tighten your waist drumming was at its performance peak, the Dogbo elders went and brought Tegli the brain behind the plot from his hiding place. He called a few of the trusted people closer to the wet wall and told them the essence of their gathering. He drew out the sword of liberation from its sheath, pointed it up, invoked the spirit of the gods and the ancestors and said a short prayer. Then he said, O Mawuga Kitakata, Uo na mi ne miadogo, azo adzo. O great God, Kitakata, open the door for us so that we can walk through it and leave. With these words, Tegli thrust the sword of liberation into the wet and softened wall and bored a big hole door pattern into it. The men pushed and the soft wall fell before them. After scouts had gone ahead to find suitable lands for settlement, the various groups moved out of Nazi. The women, the sick, and children were led out first, followed by the elderly, while the energetic youth and middle-aged men stayed behind to continue drumming, singing and dancing. After all the others were gone, the drummers and the few remaining singers and dancers followed them. The last part of the group walked backwards on the exact footsteps of the earlier parties for about 2 miles so that their footprints might not betray their whereabouts. After King Agokoli discovered that the Dogboawo had escaped, he ordered a search for them and demanded their return back to Nazi. The search party however got confused. Tracing the footsteps of the Dogboawo always led them back to the dwelling place of the Dogboawo in Nazi. It was a brilliant and well-executed plan. The sword, adekwi, used by Tegli to bore the hole is said to be preserved to this day as part of the stool regalia of Togbui Asur, leader of Dogbo groups at Ho, a town in northern Ualand. It must be pointed out here that the history of the Asorgli of Ho mentions also a leader by name Torgbui Kaklu who led their group out of Nazi. Upon quitting the city, all the fugitives followed the same direction without a precise destination in mind. The majority of versions cite Game, south of Nazi, as the first point of rest. The rest of the story of the exodus of the Dogboawo from Nazi is told with some variations of details by all use, with particular reference to settlements they founded, later continued migration, wars they fought for territory or just survival among hostile people they met on their way, or at the places they decided to settle at. But the general outcome of the exodus is the dispersion of the Yus as a people from the first settlement they made as a group at Sevi, in present Togo, from where under different leaders according to lineage, the group split into 3, southwestwards towards the Volta, northwards toward the mountain range and southeastwards toward the sea, to frustrate the pursuit of Agokoli and finally to settle in their present homes. The old man Torgbui Tegli was reported to have died at Sevi and was buried there. Thus, from Nazi the Yu traveled together eventually to a town which is now called Sevi in the Republic of Togoland. It is about 20 kilometers from Lomé. The name Sevi means, let it grow for a while longer. When the Yus settled in this area after leaving Nazi, they decided to sow some cowpeas to sustain themselves. As if by fate, their new neighbors started becoming hostile, prompting another decision to move. One day the Yus woke up only to find that wild pigs destroyed the farms. The horror and concern generated by this tragedy led to the battle cry which is now made into a song. Aibo P, Hao P, Aibo P, Hao P. Egbal O, Enyo O, U. A free translation of this is, see how pigs have destroyed the cowpea farm. Whether good or bad, we don, care, and we would not despair. It is worthy to note that the town Sevi got its name from the plantation episode. The story is that before the cowpeas could fully mature, the insecurity of the place led to agitation among sections of the people for early departure. This was opposed by others who insisted that they should wait, despite all odds, for the crops to mature for harvesting before making the next move. Apparently, the disagreement led to the departure of the main group with the others remaining there to give the name Sevi to the place. Here is another historical fact about a new food crop, Agbodeka, 1997. Cassava, the most widely used root crop, is named in Ewe as Agbeli. Literally translated, it means, there is life. The story is told of the migration of our ancestors who during their long journey became hungry and had nothing to eat. Fortunately, they came across a root crop, which they suspected could be edible. They uprooted the crop, boiled it and ate, and found it to be tasty and satisfying. Experiencing no harmful effects, they acknowledge the crop as life-giving. Cassava has since become a very useful crop in Eweland and its utilization extended beyond simply boiling. Cassava is now processed into other products, which are used in the diet in a great variety of ways. We have read above that during the migration from Nazi, the people split into three broad groups, which were to populate the northern, central and southern areas of their new home stretching up to the Volta in the west. Oral tradition says the central and northern Dogbo groups were led out of Sevi by leaders who included Akodo, Kadzoda, Amegali, Asur and Bisiaku, and they led the various branches to settle places like Hoho, Mats, Peki, Asorgli, Awudome, Bay, Gbi, Cape Pondo, Logba, Alavano, Capelime, Agu, Capedze, Wadze, and other towns. Amegali however left the group and went on his own with some followers family southwards till he made a settlement close to Jay, or Accra, which is Legan, still bearing his name. He left later to go in search of the main Dogbo group which had settled at Alga. From the central and northern groups, some Dogboawa went and founded the settlements of Ho, Akovia, Takla, Kapenoy, Hadzo, Klavi, Sokode, Abutia, and Adaklu, all in the central part of their new home. The third group, made up of various sections of the Dogboawa, moved together southward. The group split at Gaff and further divisions occurred within the sub-groups as the southward movement, coupled with the founding of various settlements, progressed. They include the founders of B, Togo, Wida, Al, Klakur, Avenue, Fenyi, Afife, Zadze, Mafi, Agave, Tavi, Toko, and Tanyagbi. Establishment of some U townships. It was at Sevi that the U's divided into different groups, one of which the ALUs belonged to. During the Exodus, Agbana, one of Togbi Wanya's children, led the advanced party. Before moving out, it was usual for scouts who were powerful hunters to go out first and look out for safe routes. Togbi Zay Sali Akplormata, a mystic, was one such scout for the Dogbo group, who reportedly cast a sleeping spell on the Nazi people to enable the U's to move out undictated amidst drumming and dancing, moving backwards to show footsteps entering rather than leaving. His twin brother Otsu Sala left the Nazi settlement earlier, went to Awukugwa, performed miracles and healed with herbs. Osei Tutu found him there at the court of the Awukugwahen and invited him to Kumasi to help him claim his throne as Asanthen, unify the Asante state, and he conjured out of the sky a golden stool that has till this day embodied the soul of the Asante nation. He was called Okamfo from Nazi, and corrupted into Kamfo anarchy. We will have a detailed inside story of this legendary and mystical personality, his lineage and travails in pre-colonial times in later parts of this narrative. Togbi Sali Akpormata with other hunters such as Togbi Satsu Batemanu aka Adaladza, were members of the Dogbo Scouts from Sevi who went southeastwards, under their leaders. The present-day Alos traveled from Sevi as one unit, but later divided into two groups under the leadership of Omega Atsu Madapkui Wanya and his nephew Togbi Shriai aka Kapano Adza Ashimati. Torgbui Atsu Wanya led the main group which went south and moved along the seashore westwards, founding settlements along the way. After many discoveries and settlements, Wenya's group reached a sandbar and called it KZ, which means the top of the sand. It is presently called Kedzi. Subsequently the group crossed the sandbar and Wanya informed his followers, Mivadu Ta, meaning they had reached the head, or the tip of the sand. Consequently, the settlement there was named Kita. They later founded other towns including Tegbi and Wo. As they reached what is now called present-day Loga, Wanya was found to be aging and tiring. When his followers asked him when they were going to leave again, he answered, Nyamia mi lo. Afia diki yi Miguel Nunye o. I am exhaustively coiled, my limbs are shrunken. I can't go any further. The name of this settlement was also taken after Milo, and was contracted to Alo. Being the capital of the whole Alo nation, the adjective ga, meaning big, was added and it became Alga, and the people Alawo. Later on, some settlers of Klakur and founders of Wita also left off from Omega Atsu Wenya's group. The second group of the Dogbo people was led by Kapano Ashimati aka Sroir Shri I. Shri and his followers took the northern route off the Atlantic coast and settled at present Klakur where Kli found the settlement. Kapano then continued by canoe via the Kita Lagoon to settle at Fiexer, and founded various communities on the northern shore of the Great Kita Lagoon, but later moving on to join the Uncle Wanya at Alga and take over his leadership role as king of the Dogbos now Alawo. As we saw earlier, Kapano's half-brothers Adzofia and Adzoi co-founded Zadze and Asem founded Mafi Kumasi. The following brothers of Torgbui Shri I, also children of King Ashimati, settled at various places giving rise to some differences in clan names. Descendants of his brother Adu Lo led by his son Adisre and Aga Amegaiber, brother of Shri I, settled at Zadze. Asuma settled at Penyi. Eti settled at Avenue. Kofi Apo settled at Mafi. Other settlements followed later from additional splits, such as some. These are all people of Dogbo descent and became part of the southern Use. Meanwhile, other groups also split off from Shri's party and found states of Avenue, Fenyi, Zadze, and Mafi. The founders of Afife also formed part of Shri's party at one time but tarried and found Afife. The remainder of Shri's party went on to find Kaji from where Shri later on rejoined his uncle Wanya at Aelga. The towns are settlements actually founded by Wanya and Shri. Their families and immediate circle of followers came to constitute one kingdom, Al with the capital at Aelga. Other towns that belong to Al are Anyako, Siva, Kaji, Alakpal, Atiavi, Asadame, Fiexer, Siame, Atito, Atateti, Aturkor, Huti, Srogbo, Wo, Tegbi, Kita and Kedzi, to name only a few. In the neighborhood of Alo, settlements founded by other members of the Dogbo subgroup who had been part of Wanya and Shri's party at one time or the other also evolved into states like Klakur, Avenue, Fenyi, Zadze, Wita and Afife. Oral tradition links the founding of Bolo, Dafur, Batter, Agave and Tefel with the third group of people from Natsi. Thus the people of Alo state and all these other states described above belonged originally to the Dogbo group under Wanya and constituted essentially one people as they entered their new home in what is now southeastern Ghana. Another Dogbo subgroup or its divisions founded b. Togo, in present-day Republic of Togo. From available evidence, it would appear that the Alo and their neighbors arrived in their present homes sometime around the early part of the 17th century. We do not know anything about the original inhabitants of these areas. However, it is believed that either they fled as the Alos were coming, or became assimilated into the Alo population. Some of the implements and tools used by these earlier inhabitants have survived in the form of Sophia or Sopevo, called stones of God. In what is now Alo territory there were traces of the former inhabitants at Wo, Atiavi and also at Avenifem. This final migration saw the Alos in their present homes by the early 1700s. Later around 1792, as a result of an agreement that miscarried, the residents of Kita migrated to and found Agbozum, which became the capital of a new state of Sum. Two of Togbi Wanya's descendants, Awanyador and Akaga were co-founders of Agbozum, was established after Kita War of 1790. The majority left in bulk. A few who could not go with them left in small batches afterwards. A few fled to seek refuge with relatives at Wugat Zomei. When they started coming back after some time because of their landed property, the Alo asked help from Kobu Kodo, Nana Akodo Kwafo, Akwamuhen, to eject the remnants. Blakusu became the dividing line between Alo and some along the coast. During this and other times, Aloga provided a court of second instance for Aflao and Wida who readily identified themselves with Alo. She was, therefore, regarded as the big sister and was referred to in matters of common interest. Together, these states constitute Greater Alo. In addition to Alo Us, there is a large number of other U states like Adaklu, Peki, Ho, Toba, Kev, Cape Pondo and Hoho, to their north of Ghana and B, Jen, Watsi, etc., in the Republic of Togo. Unification. May 1956 plebiscite. Unlike the political and social organization of the Akan, where matrilineal rule prevails, the U are essentially a patrilineal people. The founder of a community became the chief and was usually succeeded by his paternal relatives. The largest independent political unit was a chiefdom, the head of which was essentially a ceremonial figure who was assisted by a council of elders. Chiefdoms ranged in population from a few hundred people in one or two villages to several thousands of people in chiefdom with a large number of villages and surrounding countryside. Unlike the Asante among the Akan, no U chiefdom gained hegemonic power over its neighbor. The rise of U nationalism in both Ghana and Togo was more of a reaction to the May 1956 plebiscite that partitioned Ualand between the Gold Coast and Togo than to any sense of overriding ethnic unity. Before the First World War, Togoland occupied the area from Lomé to the present western boundary of Benin on the east, and north of the current Anlo-U land and Tornu areas. After the First World War, Togoland was divided into two parts. The western Togoland was given to the British to administer with the Gold Coast, while eastern Togoland was given to the French. Just before independence of Ghana, a plebiscite was held to decide whether western Togoland would like to unite with eastern Togoland or remain with the Gold Coast. The result was that western Togoland decided to remain with the Gold Coast. After independence, the southeastern bulge of the Gold Coast, which comprised mostly Ualand, which was made up of Anlo-Us, was added to the Togoland, which was a mandated territory under the Security Council of the United Nations, to form the present Volta region of Ghana, with the regional capital city at Ho. So, the plebiscite united Anlo-Ualand with western Togoland, which lies north of Anlo-Uland. The partition of Togoland was achieved when the Security Council divided Togoland into East and West Togoland. The common, Iwegbi, remains a unifying element to identify the Yus as one people, but living in different countries as a result of colonization, the scramble for Africa and the division of the spoils of war by the colonizing powers after World War I, at the Berlin Conference, and then the plebiscite conducted by the United Nations in 1956, just before the Gold Coast gained independence on 6 March, 1957 to become Ghana. Thus we now have Yus, some with close family ties, in republics of Ghana, Togo and Benin. But as a people, the Yus are one people, and especially in the diaspora, far from home, they are each other's keepers and look out for each other. That is one of the reasons why CIANA, Council of Yu Associations in North America, was formed. This is laudable and must be maintained and nurtured to grow, so that even though politically we belong to different nationalities, as a people with common origin and language, we can form a strong unified Yualand. National flag of Ewe people and ethnic flag, just like the Yu flag is a flag that symbolizes a certain ethnic group. Ethnic flags are often introduced to the ethnic community through the respective cultural or political ethnic movements. In many cases, they have ancient origins, or, at least, they are inspired by symbols rooted in historical and cultural tradition of a people. They are popular among ethnic minorities and some ethnic majorities, especially in multi-ethnic countries. An ethnic flag can be either recognized or not by the central government. Some ethnic flags are banned by the central governments of sovereign states because they also serve as the flags of separatist groups, or groups perceived as such by the prevailing authorities. Don't forget to subscribe, share and also comment.